All right, so thank you very much for coming back for the afternoon session. Hare Krishna. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. So just as a reminder, this Memorial Day weekend is featuring the Daughters of Srila Prabhupada, with the focus on the quality of compassion that Srila Prabhupada has for everyone, but especially for his female disciples. And as a reminder, we'll just reintroduce everybody. On your far left is Ananga Manjari, or Nanga Manjari. Where's your accent?
Wherever you like.
Okay. She flew out here from Florida. In the middle we have Kusha Devi Dasi, flew out from Hawaii, where she was born and raised. And then Mother Malati Devi Dasi came from New Vrindavan, and she's been actually on a speaking tour. Various cities and towns and temples are asking her to come and share her memories, because she was one of the earliest disciples, female disciples, joined in San Francisco. And originally from what town? Where were you raised? Sacramento. Okay, good. So we're going to just discuss some anecdotes, some stories that they had with Srila Prabhupada, and we'll do a round robin, go from one Mataji to the next, and hopefully these qualities, the lessons that we learn from them, will inspire us to remember the greatness of Srila Prabhupada as the Acharya for the next 10,000 years or 9,500 years, whatever it is. Long time. Hopefully we're back home before that. And with that inspiration and realization of Prabhupada's qualities, that's one quality out of 26. Prabhupada was at a radio interview in Florida once, and the host of the show said, well, Prabhupada was talking about a Vaishnav. And the man said, well, how will I, he had a British accent, not that I can imitate that one so well. But he said, how will I know if I meet a Vaishnav? And Prabhupada said, he will be a perfect gentleman. So the qualities of the Vaishnava are that of a gentleman, and there are 26 qualities as stated in the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we're focusing on the one quality of compassion today, mercy. So, Mother Ananga Manjari, let's start with a kind of a light story, talking about the beehive lady.
Okay.
All right, is everybody ready?
In speaking on compassion, that Prabhupada was full of compassion, again, I want to say that was his strength. Compassion and humility was the power, spiritual power of all saintly people, actually. And he was mentioning the 26 qualities of a devotee, and I was looking at them all, and more than half are about compassion, about kindness to everyone, a friend to everyone. And if you study that, more than half is about compassion. So I was here in LA, it was 1972, and I was in Srila Prabhupada's room, and there was this lady there, several of us were there, and one lady, she had just come from England, and she had, in those days, the early 70s, they had the big beehive on their head, like put your hair up almost like a bee. They called it the beehive. So she had this, and it was very blonde, platinum blonde beehive, and she was sitting there with a skirt, and she was from England, and one devotee introduced her and said, Prabhupada, this, I forgot her name, but she had written to you in England. She's from England, and she wrote to you, and she wants to speak with you. She's so happy to meet you here. And Srila Prabhupada said, okay, thank you. And he said something like, what would you like? What do you need? And she said, oh, I wish I could do an English accent. But anyway, I'm going to say it in a southern accent because it's the only one I can come up with easily. But she goes, oh, Srila Prabhupada, I just want to get initiated by you. And it was like that kind of a mood. And everyone was like shocked. And she's like asking for initiation in this way. And Prabhupada said, "Do you know the 4 regulative principles?" And she goes, "I never smoked in my whole life." And Prabhupada said, "Okay." And the next day, when we were all sitting for initiation, it was the old temple with the pews in this other building part. Srila Prabhupada was up front, and devotees were getting initiated, and he was saying their names, and it was a very lighthearted, wonderful time. And then she came up, and he said her name, and she came up, and he said, "You are now Meru Devi Dasi," and he handed her the beads. Meru is the Mount Meru, is all full of snow, the white snow and the big mountain on your head. And, I don't know if everyone got it, but I was laughing a lot. And so this is Prabhupada's compassion, that anyone can come, and it's this sincerity of intention that is the most important thing, not so much what you know or what you do, but the sincerity of how you live, how you do it, how you feel. Thank you.
Great. Kusha, let me ask you, going down the line, you have a story about sprouts.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell that story to everyone?
Yes. Well, it was just in the beginning when we were starting to make sprouts for salads and everything like that. Previously, it wasn't really a thing. Now it's like, it's a thing. And so we served Srila Prabhupada sprouts on his Rajbog tray. And Srila Prabhupada said, "These each are living entities, each one of them. You need to not waste any of them. They need to all be offered to Krishna, and you can't waste." Because, he had so much compassion, so much concern for that every living entity's energy would be offered to Krishna. And we're just arbitrarily washing them down the drain as we're trying to get the seed pods off of them and being a little hasty. But Srila Prabhupada wasn't hasty. It's just like when there was just a little bug crawling. He said, "Take it, get some flower prasad, and take it outside." He was very compassionate to every living entity. There was another time a cat was licking him during the massage, kitty cat, little kitten, and Prabhupada was letting him. And so every living entity that came across Srila Prabhupada's path. There was another time in Swansea Beach Park in Hauula in Hawaii. There was a dog, a young dog, under more like a German Shepherd puppy. And he was frolicking with Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't even show him the cane. He didn't do there was no sense of being threatened. He was running at top speed and massaging against Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was like a young boy with this dog, and they were having so much fun. And then when this was going on, this was like a rasa for a month. Even to the point of once it ran between Prabhupada's legs, it was like really frolicking. His name was Baron. The dog's name was Baron. And that dog, when Srila Prabhupada left after a month of Leela with this dog, the dog disappeared. And the family was so distraught. They were looking high, low, everywhere. Where is the dog? They never found the dog. That dog, but years later, the owner of the dog did some free work for us. And he said, "I'm Prabhupada's only atheist meat-eating devotee." My dog liked Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada's compassion is boundless. It's more exactly what Ananga Manjari was saying, that it's your mood, the mood of service. Even you can be a total nonsense on every other level, but if you love Prabhupada and you want to serve Srila Prabhupada, he accepts. That's how compassionate he is. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Alati, I think you also have a Japati Vrindavan story regarding dogs. Do you remember that pastime or that anecdote? Share that with everyone if you want.
Hare Krishna. In our initial forays going into Vrindavan, it wasn't like, hey, Kush, you want to go to Vrindavan? Let's go. Hey, come on, Ananga, let's go. Not like that at all. We were in India to serve. So we only went where we were invited, and specifically where Srila Prabhupada would tell us to go. So actually it wasn't until over a year plus, that we actually went to Vrindavan at the behest and guided by Srila Prabhupada. And we all went in a bus. Prabhupada went in an ambassador car. We had an air-conditioned bus. By air-conditioned, I mean there was no windows. The windows had no glass. They were just free throw. There was no padding on the seats. It was quite minimal in terms of comfort. And we weren't walking all around everywhere every day. We would have programs. It would be, Prabhupada would greet local people. We'd have our morning program, do our duties, do our services, and then we would go on this fabulous bus, and we'd go to maybe 1 or 2 destinations. So one destination that didn't involve a dog was Radhakund. And then a couple days or so later, we were going to Govardhan. And we would be there for most of the day. It would take most of the day, so I brought my trunk to cook. Like, we would eat, somehow or other prasadam would show up for the devotees, but I would cook wherever we were for Srila Prabhupada, which sometimes means, actually I'd be on the bus cooking, but in this case, the destination was going to be Govardhan. I'm going to go back to Radhakund for a moment. At Radhakund, a nice body of water, and it was really blistering hot. So the devotees, with great enthusiasm, they started diving in, men and women, splishing and splashing. Prabhupada was like shocked. I mean, there were no obeisances, no pranams, no prayer, just dove in, men and women splishing and splashing. So he's calling everybody out. I have to say, not with any pride, I didn't jump in. The only reason was I can't swim. So I was saved, but that was the only reason. So now here we are at Govardhan, and there were 2 kunds, one and then another. And Prabhupada pointed the men at one and the women at the other. So it was a nice place. Then on the other side of the street was a row of freshly painted, it was like a veranda, a long veranda. There were doors, sort of like almost like a motel type of situation, colorful colors and paints, and a small covered veranda. And so Prabhupada steps out of the bus, and he goes over with his assistant, and he indicates the door. And I was really curious, like, well, what's behind the door? Opens the door, Prabhupada steps through, and it was just a facade. There was no room, there was just more Braj, the land. And so I get my little cooking kit together. I'm sitting on the veranda cooking, and when you cook for Prabhupada, timing is essential. He has a routine. I notice I only have a small quantity of atta, flour, for making the chapatis, and that's the last thing on the cooking. And so I'm not the best roti maker. They don't all puff up, and they're not always perfectly round. So I'm just hoping that it'll go well today, because I only have this little amount of flour. And went well. Prabhupada comes back. The devotees, ladies on one side, the men on the other. Prabhupada takes his place, and I come out with the plate, which had 1 puffed up chapati, and then I was going to make a couple more, as he would have, fresh ones. So as I'm putting the plate down, suddenly 2 typical Braj dogs for the time. It meant they were just chewed up hardly any hair anywhere. The ears were full of holes. Maybe they were missing an ear. The tail would be bent and crooked. Just, looking pretty pathetic. And they came with their snarling teeth, and they're coming right to Prabhupada. And I'm like just in this position, like wanting to do something. And the men start to jump up. Some of them had dundas, so they're grabbing their dundas. And the women were in a kind of like, it was like charades, where you stop in a certain, Prabhupada looks around really quickly, and he indicates we should all sit down. In the meanwhile, the dogs are right about to be in Prabhupada's face. And he's very calm about it. He picks up that roti, tears it in half, and he hands one piece to each of these snarling dogs, and then he goes, "Jao," means go. And they took these fearful animals, took the little piece of roti and turned around and walked away. And Prabhupada looks at us and he says, "You have to be very careful. You don't know who they may be." In Vrindavan, you don't know who they may be. Because the trees, the plant, the creeper, the animals, they're not your average souls.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Hand that to Ananga Manjari. So, Ananga Manjari, tell us about the story of Ajamila. You were in a room. Was it a room or classroom? Or?
Well, both. It took place both.
Okay.
So it was in Philadelphia. I don't remember the year, 70-something. Anyway, Prabhupada was there, and he was giving a class, and the class was on Srimad Bhagavatam about the pastime of Ajamila, who was a Brahmin in his youth, a devotee, and then he fell down. And so Prabhupada was talking about this, and he said it was an accidental fall down. And he said he may have remembered when he called out, at the time of death, he was calling out Narayan, Narayan. That was the name of his son. And Prabhupada said he may have been remembering the real Narayan, Krishna, or he may have just been calling his son, Narayan, Narayan. He said it doesn't matter. He said, but he had an accidental fall down. And so Krishna arranged that he could call his son Narayan, and that he would call on the Lord by calling on his son. So later on in the room, in a darshan room with about 10 devotees or so, one devotee said, "Prabhupada, what did you mean when you said accidental fall down? Because isn't every fall down willingly? I mean, at some point you go, hey, I'm just going to go do this." And Prabhupada said, he said, when Maya has a gun to your head, that's accidental. In other words, we may not be strong enough, and the forces of the material energy are just so strong that they just pull us in a certain direction, and that's accidental. You don't mean to, you didn't want to, it might not have been your original intention, but it happens. And so the Lord is very kind, and this is, again, compassion of the Lord, who actually, the great saintly people like Prabhupada, they're just reflecting that compassion, the same compassion of the Lord. They're just reflecting that, and they're embodying that. Prabhupada embodied the compassion of the most magnificent Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda and Srimati Radharani. We were hearing the other day that Prabhupada's father said, "I want him to be a great devotee of Radharani," and that means giving compassion to everyone, being kind to everyone. And his compassion manifested as the knowledge that he gave us all. So,
Great. Thank you. You can applaud when you feel inspired and appreciate the story. Don't be shy. So, speaking of compassion for others, Prabhupada was compassionate towards your son, or towards you, when he instructed you or asked you whether your son can walk. Can you?
Yes, we were going on a morning walk. I had just given birth a couple weeks previous to this, And it was December. Still, in Hawaii, it's a little chilly in the early morning. And he was swaddled in a comforter, so you couldn't see his size. He was a tiny little peanut at 2 weeks, you know, but the quilt was a little big. So Prabhupada said, "Can he walk?" And I thought, oh, he can't see how big he is. You know, this is what I was thinking. You know, I couldn't tell how small, big, he couldn't see. So I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, he can't walk." And Prabhupada said to me, "If he can walk, he should walk." And I didn't really, at the time I was completely in illusion, 100%. But it was my good fortune that I was on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. And I used to say that for when you're a new mother, there's like fairy dust that's just kind of sprinkled over you, and you're in goo goo gaga mode, you know? You're just loving your little baby, and you're doing good if you get your rounds chanted, you know, because you're just... And so I was kind of in that phase of existence, but still getting to go on a walk with Srila Prabhupada. And years later, I could understand. He could see right through me again. Prabhupada had this very mystical way of just seeing right to the heart of who you are. And my son's name is Atmaram, and he was also known as Mamaram because I was a helicopter mom, you know, mother, a very doting mom. And Prabhupada could see that, and he was trying to give me, it was prophetic actually, that he knew it would be really hard for me to let go. And 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, this instruction is a sign, it's a coming straight from Krishna through Srila Prabhupada's mouth to me, that I need to let him walk. And even now, you know, it's difficult for me to let him walk, and he's 50. So Srila Prabhupada had a way.
He saw you were a control freak, huh?
Well, he took care of us, and he took care of us for eternity, forever. And if he would also make sure there were other people to take care of us when we needed it. And there were several instances where he asked Bhagaji to take care of us, to take us around Vrindavan, to show us where safe places to live would be, to take us on tour of Vrindavan. We were women alone. And he had the head of the train station bring us food at Kumbha Mela because we were cooking for ourselves. He was literally our personal servant. And he put 2 carts on the train to bring us into Kumbha Mela. Prabhupada asked him to take care of these girls. You know, so Prabhupada would either take care of us or make sure we were taken care of.
Jai, thank you. That's great. Malati, speaking of children, can you tell us some of the pastimes that Saraswati had with Prabhupada, how he teased her maybe or played with her, and compassionate towards her, and as a loving grandfather figure might?
I can maybe give a couple. Well, he spoke this morning how he held her and put his darling around. When we were living at John Lennon's house waiting for the buried place temple to be inhabitable, Srila Prabhupada was teaching Jamuna deity worship procedures. It is small deities. And my daughter could come and go. She didn't need an appointment. She had free entry, free ticket to see Srila Prabhupada whenever she wanted. So she was one evening in there, in his room, and the arti was going to go on, and other people were in there. And it wasn't a large, spacious place, so quite packed up. And Jamuna offers the flower, offers it to Prabhupada, and somehow or other Saraswati, that's my daughter, stood up and she starts to march out of the door. And so she's at this point, maybe about 2.5. And as she starts walking out, Prabhupada takes the flower that had just been given to him and tossed it at Saraswati, and it pumped on the back of her head. She flipped around, picked up the flower, held her arm out, and marched up to Srila Prabhupada and popped it to his mouth. So, of course, we're all foolish, but sometimes some of the servants were more foolish than others. So one of the more foolish servants observed this, and later on he criticized that Srila Prabhupada was playing with a baby, a girl baby, you know. And later on, this person, you use the term fall down. So if you in the audience don't know what we mean when we say fall down, it's not like I'm tripping. I fall down a lot in many ways, but I trip over like, you know. But fall down means you fall away from your devotional practices. That's what we're referring to by fall down. So this person had this fall down. And Prabhupada, in a letter to Garlands, when he wrote, there were 2 reasons. One was, when we watched the moon landing, I was there for that too, and he said they did not go. And this boy says, but we just saw it. It was a TV. And Prabhupada looks at him and he goes to the other person, turn off the idiot box, it just made idiots out of us. So one was that he couldn't accept Prabhupada's pointed remark, and the other was because of his interaction with Saraswati, which showed his lack of faith in the spiritual master. So now we're again at Lenin's, and I was cooking for devotees, so I could not go on the morning walks because the breakfast had to be prepared. And we lived in these converted stables. They were big, you know, there was a stable for the horse. And they'd been made into apartments, small ones, but nice, good enough. And the lower floor had double Dutch doors. Anybody here, do you know what a double Dutch door is before some people aren't. Anyway, doors like this, there's 2 parts. The top part can open up, the bottom part remains closed, even like this. So I had the top part open so I would be able to see Srila Prabhupada when he passed by for his walk. And we could hear the cane tapping on the side. At that point there was sidewalk before the grass, and so they could hear it. And so Saraswati, who was on my side, the cooking side, started jumping up and down, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Somehow she got the door open, and she ran out, grabbed his hand. There's this famous picture, you see him, like she's holding on, there's a happy mother in the back, you know, and then another devotee with her kids. So I come running out, and he looks at Saraswati, he goes, you are not properly dressed, because it was cold. He had on the wellies, rubber boots, and his big, thick coat. And she just had on a little pair of overalls. So she's holding his hand, she won't let go, and she looks at me and silently, through the eyes, bring my boots and my coat. She didn't say it but out loud, but I clearly understood. So I go to, and Prabhupada wasn't, you know, disregarding it, so I went to get the boots and the coat. And even when I put her coat on, she wouldn't let go. She was holding on, so I have to get on one side, and then she let go but grabbed his hand with the other hand, you know. And so she went on the walk in that way, put the boots on. And that was only by Prabhupada's, you know, loving compassion that she would have that sweet exchange like that. You know, and then the little boy, in the same picture, there's she's like a new bhaktin at the time, and she had a child who was the same age as my daughter. So she was Bhaktin, and she became Draupadi, and the boy became Dhruvananda. So Dhruvananda would sometimes, anyway, for sure, one time he climbed up onto where Prabhupada was sitting to speak. It was kind of an elevated situation there at Lenin's house. And Draupadi went up to get her son, and Prabhupada said, "Oh, it's okay. You're going to crawl up and get to Prabhupada's lap." But in one other sweet point, so she was already married, but they were going to have what we like to call Vedic wedding, means a fire yajna and all. So everything was set up. I'm there they've been initiated, and the husband was Devananda, she's Draupadi, and the kid Dhruvananda. So I'm there I'm taking care of the kid for the marriage, and Prabhupada looks up, he goes, "Oh, remove the child." And he goes, "Generally, the child comes after the marriage." So the child should not see the parents get married.
Thank you. Okay, Anangamanjari. Were you an actress at one point? Did you perform in some plays?
So we were doing the drama of Kamsa, the advent of Krishna, when Kamsa comes and he's angry at his sister Draupadi, kills the children, and there's a whole drama. So I was Draupadi, and so I had to dress up in a costume of like a marriage, Indian marriage. So I had all the jewelry and the makeup and the sari, and we were doing this drama. So at the end of the drama, Prabhupada was there. He came to watch it, and then he was going to leave right then. He was leaving right after the drama to go to Vrindavan, and he wasn't feeling well, and I was thinking, this may be the last time I see Prabhupada. So while we're on stage chanting at the end of the drama, I see Prabhupada get up, and he's walking, and all the people are walking, and I go, oh my God, I might never see him again. I jump off the stage, I go running after him, and by the time I get out, his car's already, he's already gone, and I'm seeing the clouds of the end of his car, and I'm thinking, I may never see Prabhupada again. I got to see him again. So I grabbed a friend of mine. There were a lot of life members around, and there were cars there, and one car door was open. So I grabbed my friend who was very shy, and I said, let's get in that car. It's probably going to go to the airport to see Prabhupada. And she goes, are you crazy? We don't even know who owns this car. I said, doesn't matter. Let's go. And, the life members and Indian gentlemen are always usually polite. So it was so anyway, a few sannyasis came to the car, and they look in the back door, and they see me and my friend sitting there, and I'm going, Prabhupada, and I'm crying a little, and I have this costume on. I forgot that I had it. I wasn't thinking about it. And, whoops, sorry. Oh, that's okay. And so we go off to the sannyasis go, let them stay, and two of them squished into the front seat with the driver. So we went off to the airport. So when we get there, no one was at the airport. Oh, that's all right. Thank you. So no one was at the airport, and yet, that we saw outside, and we thought Prabhupada must be inside, but then some brahmachari came running out and saying, Prabhupada's not here yet. So me and this girl are standing at the curb, and we're wondering, is it that his car left first, but he's not here yet, and all the devotees are inside. So we were just standing there at the curb, and all of a sudden a car pulls up right next to me, and Prabhupada opens the back door on his own and starts standing up. And he's this close to me, and he has his cane, and he's looking at me up and down, and I forgot. I have this crazy costume on, this wedding thing, overdone, totally overdone with the makeup, and it was raining, so I was crying, and my makeup must have been smeared, and he's standing there just looking at me, and he's smiling ear to ear, and he's almost chuckling, and I'm just standing there, and I got so excited. I'm going, thank you, Prabhupada. I was thinking, what can I say to him? What's the main important thing I can say to him right now? I just kept going, thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you for everything. Thank you. And I got so excited, and it was so long. He was staring at me so long that I started jumping up and down, just on my own, clapping and jumping up and down. And he's looking at me smiling, and then he took his cane and he walks off into the airport. And my friend grabs my arm and she goes, did you see how he was smiling at you? Did you see how he was laughing at you? And then I realized the desire tree, it works. So that was, yeah, that was great mercy, and I hope that he's still laughing at me. That's my dear wish.
Hare Krishna. Kusha, can you tell us about Prabhupada's concern and care for his daughters in regards to Govinda Dasi in Jagannath Puri?
Okay, but I have to segue into something from what Malaji said.
Okay, go ahead.
About my son also, and Prabhupada being very kind. We were also in Mumbai, and Prabhupada, it was in 76, and Srila Prabhupada they would bring him down stairs in a palanquin, and he would get into the ambassador, and he'd drive the short distance to the temple. And every day Gopal Krishna Maharaj's son would ride on Srila Prabhupada's lap. And one day, they weren't there. So my son starts pitching a fit. He wants to go on Prabhupada's lap. And I'm horrified because I'm not anybody. I'm just a little old lady on the side, just shh, quiet, quiet, quiet. And Srila Prabhupada said, come on, come. And he took my little, 3-year-old, he was 3, put him on his lap and was stroking his Sika. And I ran to greet them at the other end. Prabhupada was so kind. He was so kind. Yeah. So do you still want me to tell you about Govinda Dasi?
Yes, Jagannath Puri.
Yeah, so we had, I'm going to lead up to it, because we were in Bhubaneswar with Srila Prabhupada, and he sent us on a scouting mission to go down to Jagannath Puri to see about making a reservation for rooms there, but it was either the Rotary Club or something like that, they had a convention, so they booked all the rooms. So we went back to Bhubaneswar to tell Srila Prabhupada that we would have to wait a few days. And then Prabhupada, he decided he didn't want to stay in the fancy hotel room. He wanted to stay in the mud hut on the land, because he wanted to sanctify, they just bought the land, he wanted to sanctify the place. It was Gaur Govinda, who was a brahmachari at the time, had gotten a donation of the place that is the temple now. And so Srila Prabhupada, he was sitting out front, and we were all sitting around. We were staying in a farmhouse, and Guru Kripa had his men, and Gargamuni had his men. They were in Mercedes vans. And Prabhupada looked out over the field, and he said, "We have got enough men now. Now it's time to boil the milk. We don't need to thin it out so much. It's thin milk. You add water, you make the milk thin, but we want to boil the milk, let it be concentrated." And that was in 1977. I came to find out, it's the first thing that I came to find out, it was about the 7th time he had said it. He said it in May 9th in 1972 in a letter to Damodar, written from Honolulu. In the same day, he wrote a letter to Rupanuga saying the same thing from Honolulu. And in June, he wrote a letter to Hamsadutta saying the same thing. From LA, he wrote a letter in 1972 to Stoka Krishna saying the same thing. And he could have said it more, but those were the written times. Prabhupada was so compassionate. He wanted to give us all personal attention and personal instruction. He didn't want to get so many disciples that he couldn't give us that personal instruction. And he started even in 1972 saying, like, slow down, slow down, let's boil the milk, let's make sure, let's care about the people we do have. And that takes my breath away, because I did hear Srila Prabhupada say that personally. And to know that he said it over and over again, and that it was important to Srila Prabhupada, that we're important to Srila Prabhupada, really is touching, extremely touching. He didn't want us to just keep expanding and expanding and have the kind of burnout kind of mentality where we train them up and toss them out type. He wanted us to care about each and every devotee that came to Krishna's lotus feet. So then we finally went down to Puri, and we found a place that Srila Prabhupada could stay. He stayed there, and we were actually there a few days before Srila Prabhupada got there. And by the time we got there, we had made friends with Bhagwan Singari, who was the dresser of Lord Jagannath. He's written about in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Singari family dresses Lord Jagannath Sringars. So we brought him to meet Srila Prabhupada, and Govindadasi had become very confident. She's very confident. And she decided to try to sneak in to see Lord Jagannath. Now here's a blonde girl from Texas with really wide shoulders. And she decides to blue eyes, very blue-eyed, and she decides to sneak in the evening and wear a chador and take a cane. And so she's pretending she's an old lady, and she's going in to see Lord Jagannath. Well, the chowkidars, or gatekeepers, they could see right through the situation, so they ripped her chador off and grabbed her cane and started beating her with the cane, so she ran out. I wasn't so brave. I was out by the gate waiting. And so we immediately went to Srila Prabhupada, just straight to Srila Prabhupada, to talk about what just happened. And Prabhupada's eyes got huge, and he was listening like it was making a big impression on Srila Prabhupada. And the next day, he was invited to a Pandal program to be the keynote speaker in dedicating this. Panda had written a book. And so Srila Prabhupada, our hero and champion, he walked in. We all made ourselves comfortable. He had a huge entourage. And the man handed him the book and said, please say something about the book. And Srila Prabhupada touched it to his head and handed it back to him and said, I have not read it. And then he immediately launched into saying, Jagannath is not Purinath, and he is not Orissanath. He is Jagannath. Jaga means Lord of the universe. He's the Lord of the universe. And his devotees will be coming from all over the universe to get his darshan, to see him. If you don't let them in, he will pack his bags and move in with us. And then there was this rip-roaring Haribo! And all the Sankirtan devotees were leaping from the chairs and jumping up and down. And this huge kirtan just ensued. And we walked down the beach to Haridas Thakur's Samadhi. And we were off the ground, jumping up and down, Hare Krishna. And it was a rip-roaring kirtan. They brought Srila Prabhupada a chair at Haridas Thakur's Samadhi. And Bhagwan Singari had come with us. He said he never saw any such kirtan in his life. He said it was amazing. The devotees were, Prabhupada knew how to save us in every instance. He did it in Hawaii too. He cooked for us after our temple was in, he took care of us like a father. He actually cooked for us. And here he was saving us again, and he was speaking to the Panda community and saying, let them in, they're Jagannath's devotees too. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada is our hero and savior. So compassionate. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Wonderful. Haribol. Nagamantri, can you tell us if I say Jai Om story? Is that
Oh.
ringing any bells?
Okay, yes.
Go ahead.
We were speaking about the children and how Prabhupada was very compassionate with the children and he loved the children. And yesterday, Kroda Shamani also mentioned how much he loved the children, and that's very important that we imbibe that and love children, even though sometimes it takes patience and tolerance. But especially our children and all children of the world, we're all God's children. So anyway, it was here in LA in the temple room in 72, and it was the old temple room. And there was big kirtan, and everyone was happy and dancing and chanting. And then at the end, Prabhupada started saying the Jai Om prayers. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa. And he's very serious and grave. And I was in the back, but I wanted to see him. So I kind of put my head up to watch him doing this, and I saw how he was being, his voice was very grave. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Parabhajakacharya. And meanwhile, there were some little children in front of him, several little children. And you know how little children are, they're just standing in front of Prabhupada's Vyasa-san, and they're kind of moving back and forth and just looking at him with their big eyes. And Prabhupada, while he's saying the Jai Om prayers, sounding very grave, he was making faces at the children at the same time. He's raising his eyebrows and making like Hanuman eyes, big eyes with his eyebrows up and down, and he's smiling. And I'm thinking, wait, how can he be doing this? It was incongruent with his face and the voice that I was hearing. But it was going on, and I thought how he loved the children. And then at the very end, when everyone, when he says, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Ki Jai, everyone, Ki Jai, everyone's saying Ki Jai. The little children went, Jai Prabhupada. And then one of them all of a sudden realized it was Prabhupada standing there. And he pointed and said, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said in the microphone, he knows me. And it was so sweet. It was so sweet. So Prabhupada was playing with the children during this very serious thing going on. So two things at the same time were going on. Another time I was in Bombay in Prabhupada's room, and actually Kishori was a French devotee who was the wife of Surabhi, who actually was the architect for most of the big temples in Vrindavan and Juhu in Bombay, and I'm not sure Mayapur too. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, she was a very strong person, and she tells the story, and I was there when this happened. So she was telling the story that she was very upset because the devotees were telling her that she had to send her son to a Gurukula away from France all the way in America, in Dallas at the time. And she was very upset. So she went personally to see Prabhupada, and she explained, I was there, Prabhupada was giving darshan with many, educated and high society Indian people. And when he saw her face coming through the door that she was upset, he told everyone, okay, darshan is over, everyone has to leave. And it was my service to give everyone, make sure they all got some prasadam. So I thought, wow, that was quick. And so I gave the prasadam out, and then she was sitting alone with Prabhupada. He called her, sit next to me, and he said, what's wrong, what's happening? And I was outside the door, but I was listening, and she was explaining, Prabhupada, their devotees are telling me I have to send my child away, and I have to do this, and it's the only, you said that we have to do this, and I don't want to do it because I'm hearing these things that are not really quite right, how they're not treating the children with so much love and respect and compassion. So Prabhupada was listening very carefully. He said, I never said that you had to. He said, if you can, you're a Vaishnav, you're a devotee, you keep your child at home, you can teach him. No, I never said. Who is saying these things? That you had to. And I think this is an important point when we're talking about the children, because to know what Prabhupada's intention was. And so then he wrote a whole letter after that to the temple in Dallas, and I know for sure that, anyway, I had a friend who was living there at the time, and she told me that they just threw out the letters that Prabhupada was saying, treat the children nicely, you cannot harm them, you cannot, be angry with them, you have to make everything fun for them. He said, make Krishna consciousness fun for them. But anyway, within 2 months, that whole project, or 2 or 3 months after that, that whole project closed down. Prabhupada closed down the whole project. It was a huge project. Thousands of millions of dollars went into it. He closed it down because the children's welfare was in his foremost mind and heart. And when we're saying we have to care, how he cared for the woman, he cared for the devotees, he cared for everyone. We were his sons and daughters, his children, and we were his disciples, and he cared for all of us, and he cared for the children. So I just want to say that's a very important point, and thank you.
Excellent.
And he liked to play with them, and he made it fun for them. That's why they loved him, and that's why we love him, because he was compassionate. Thank you.
Malati?
At a historical point, my daughter was there also at that school. The compelling reason was the government was not recognizing the school, and the children would be forced. Either we had to accept the government way of doing, or the kids had to be sent out. And he didn't want the kids going out and being under the hands of the karmis. So that was a compelling reason also. But this boy you were talking about, his name was Hari Kirtan, and a lot of times people ask me, what happened to the little Jagannath deities that you originally found? So I was in Bombay when the son was going to be sent to America, because the husband was taking sannyas. So I felt like he's going alone to America, like my daughter had been sent to America alone. At this point, she hadn't gone yet. But I felt he shouldn't go alone, so I gave him the little Jagannath, the original ones. I didn't have any concept of posterity of the future. And then that school closed, he was sent to New Vrindavan. And then the leader there got a letter from Prabhupada saying the children shouldn't have their own deities because they don't know how to care for them. So the children under 10 should not have deities. So in that way, the deities were taken, anybody under 10, and I don't know what happened after that to them.
Yeah, Garland. Did Prabhupada Garland your son?
Yeah, there's, in Hawaii, you can easily buy garlands. And so daily I would run down and get what they call bela, and in Hawaii they call pikaki, jasmine. I'd get one strand of small little bela flowers, and my son would come tooling in with the garland and give the garland to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada would take one of his garlands off and garland my son. They had a real rasa. My son would dance in front of Srila Prabhupada, and the whole cookie thing is epic. But the other thing that Srila Prabhupada would, because he would play with the children. And when Prabhupada would take his Charnamrita water, he would take the Charnamrita and then get the wash water, he would flick it on my son's head. And I would just go nuts. I was so ecstatic by Srila Prabhupada doing that one thing, just the silliest little thing. He'd mess with him and flick the water on him. But I just thought, I want some of that blessing. It was just so beautiful to see the interaction in Kumbha Mela and on the train with Prabhupada. The same thing every day. This pastime went on for 3 months when we traveled with Prabhupada. This exchange of garlands would go on daily. It was a beautiful ras.
Did you go into detail about the train? Rameshwar was
No,
complaining
I
that...
I do know the backstory on it now. There's interesting, because you can have rough experiences in your life that end nicely. and they become like so valuable and so beautiful and so juicy. And this was, we were on the train to Kumbha Mela, and Govindadasi remembered 10 years before this that Prabhupada told her all about this most auspicious Kumbha Mela, that Prabhupada said, I will take you. And all of a sudden we realized Prabhupada has Vaksiddhi, his mouth to Krishna's ears. Why are we on the train with Prabhupada to Kumbha Mela? He explained it was the most auspicious. It was 12 times 12. It happens every 12 years. This one was the one that happens every 144 years. So there we were. And Prabhupada's compassion at that Kumbha Mela towards children, towards women, towards the society in general was epic, because as we landed, what happened was Mr. Gupta put 2 extra cars on the train because there was no way in and no way out. It was sold out. And so because there were 2 extra cars, we landed far from the platform. You know, there was no platform to get out from, and we landed in the dark. So we had to make our way. Haribo Ujjala, Hare Krishna. I'm seeing friends, it's so nice, Hare Krishna. Anyway, there we were in the dark, and we got to the site, and we were in yurts, and we were on straw beds. And the next morning, Prabhupada saw that there was not facility to feed everyone. He said, what? Only enough for us? This is not right. He wanted prasadam distribution to be done widely. He had compassion for everyone at Kumbha Mela. We were at the edge of the camp under the railroad tracks. And Prabhupada said, what is this? This is remote. We should be in the middle of the action. So he said, never mind. He was pretty angry with the organizer, and he was rough with him. And so they got a huge banner that said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, and ISKCON, Hare Krishna. And so you could see that banner anywhere in the entire Kumbha Mela. You could see it. They attached it under the railroad tracks. To this day, that's the Kumbha Mela site we still have, and it's the center of the Kumbha Mela. The Kumbha Mela has grown. The last one, there's going to be one this year in 2025 in January, and it happened 12 years back. I went to that one too, and those Kumbha Melas, they're so auspicious because it's a congregational chanting. There was 32 million people chanting the holy names of Krishna at the last one. So we've become the center of the entire Kumbha Mela. Prabhupada said the same thing about Vrindavan temple. He said, it will become the center of Vrindavan. Whatever Prabhupada says will happen. Same with Bhubaneswar. And so what he did was, since we were out at the edge of the world, he organized us into parties and said, go out and bring the people here. Because he wanted them to get exposure to this process. He had compassion for all of us. There were many things that happened. He organized us to be taken care of because we were eating what only we cooked. Prabhupada said, if you want to be healthy, eat what you cook. So in India, we didn't want to fall sick. We didn't eat anything outside. We only cooked and ate. And he had people bringing us boga. And on the way out, Prabhupada's personal assistant, a sannyasi, decided that he wanted our bogie, our coupe, our place on the train. And he decided that we weren't that important, and we're just 2 women and a child. He wanted it for important sannyasis. And Mr. Gupta was telling us there's some scuttlebutt about you not getting back on the train. And here we are, 2 women and a child. We're going to be stranded in the middle of, like, heavy chaos. So Prabhupada stopped it, and Mr. Gupta told us Prabhupada stopped it. But years later, I complained to the person who was trying to do that to us personally. I said, "You tried to throw us off the train." And he told us the backstory, which was great. And the backstory is Prabhupada said, they are the most important people. So it was worth it. The suffering was worth it.
Very nice. Srila Prabhupada, ki jai. Malati, let me ask you something in relationship to that type of relationship that you had with Prabhupada, about how important you are. And when you cook for Prabhupada and his godbrothers, can you expand on that and your last realization about that?
Hare Krishna. Often, what looks to be centered on a particular person is really a bigger picture. Here's an example being used, in this case myself, but there was a bigger example being made. So the first Mayapur festival, celebrating the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, not the first in Mayapur, but the first for ISKCON. It's 72, I believe. And there was nothing of ease at that point. Has anybody here been to Mayapur recently, in the last 10 years or so? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's a paved road, there's service stations, etc. None of that existed. Dirt road, nothing, not even a chaiwala when you would turn off the main road and go to our place. And we had no clue what we were going to be confronted with. We just had directions. Starting from Howrah, the train station in Calcutta, then we took a dinky train, one of those trains that everybody's on the train, including animals, goats and chickens and anything that moved and crowed and mooed, and us. Then you get off at Krishnanagar and you find some bus, if you're lucky, and that would take you to Mayapur. And there was the only type of business at that point was sadhu business, temples. It was only temples. There was a post office, a little post office across from the yoga pit. That was it. We didn't have a gate yet. It was just open land. So I get off the bus with my daughter, and we're all getting off for the first time. And, you would think we'd be totally thrilled. Here we are, the land of Lord Chaitanya's birth. But honestly, I was just totally perplexed and bewildered. I have this kid, what am I going to do with? I don't see anything at all in terms of accommodations. There's one water pump like this with no drainage, so it's just you had to go through mud to get there. Somebody runs up to me and goes, "Oh, you're here, good, I'll show you where the kitchen is." And I understood probably I would end up cooking, but I'd just gotten off the bus and I had no clue what was what. So I walk, somebody brings my trunk, because in my trunk I would carry a couple of saris, my couple of things for my kid, and then cooking equipment, including a stove, 2 stoves. One was they're wonderful stoves. You fill them up with kerosene, and then you pump them up and light a match and they blow up in your face. And the other one is, it's just like a bucket with mud inside and some bars over the top. So that way you could use some sticks or gobar, cow dung. So that was my cooking. The kitchen was just the backside of Prabhupada's little, the only structure that we had there. A little thatched roof hut. That was where Prabhupada. Electricity had just arrived, and it would go on at flickering times at no set schedule occasionally here and there during the day. So devotees lived in tents, and they were not the cool kind of tents we have today. They were leaky old tents, and we just had straw on the floor. And we didn't have these super sleeping bags. I don't know if anybody remembers, like those Coleman lumpy cotton-filled sleeping bags, which meant if it rained, which it did, your sleeping bag would get wet. It was not easy situation. I had a daughter and a husband to take care of. So I go back to the kitchen, which was just the other side of the hut, out on the ground, and a fellow gives me a few straggly vegetables, and I'm expected to cook on the spot for Srila Prabhupada. And now I look at it, why didn't we even think of getting an extra stove? Now, why I'm saying this is because the last thing you do when you cook is do the chapatis, and you need 2 stoves. But the servant would come in and take one of my stoves to heat the water for Prabhupada. So it just added to the anxiety. And why didn't we think to get another one? Probably because we didn't have the money. But I would have to go shopping, and there wasn't any place to go shopping except to cross the river to Navadvip. So with my daughter in tow, and the little tiny money that I could get out of the treasurer, because we didn't have a lot of money. So it was, the duty of the treasurer at that time was just to say no. And it wasn't because he was trying to be hard, it's that we didn't have much. I wanted to get a pineapple one day, and they wouldn't let me get a pineapple for Prabhupada because he wouldn't eat the whole thing. And we didn't have a refrigerator that it meant they thought it would be wasted because the devotees would eat the rest, right? Then I'd have to get on this ferry boat. Those boats that get across the river. And before you get to the boat, there used to be a guy, a self-appointed person, who would accost anybody to try to get money out of them before you got to the boat. He had nothing to do with any governance. It was his own thing. And then he sees this white lady, and there weren't so many of us at that point, so, oh boy, he was going to get rich. But I didn't have enough money to give a pesa or even an anna. Everything was so tight. So then I'd get in a bit of a fight with that guy. Then I'd get in a boat, and I knew what the price was supposed to be, but suddenly it was more for me, so I had to fight with the boatman to get off. The other side, there's another self-appointed guy on the way up, and then you get out to the market. Well, first you had to get a rickshaw, so you get your rickshaw, you go to the market, you fight with the sabji wala place, so you go to the fruit place and you fight with those people, then you come back and you fight with the rickshaw about the price, then you finally get back on that boat fighting with the guy. It just was a battle, it was like Kushetra for me. And finally get there, and my meditation was really how to properly cook for Srila Prabhupada so that he would be satisfied and pleased. Whether he was pleased with me or not wasn't so much. I wanted him to be pleased with the service, that he would be satisfied, So I was thinking about that the whole time and trying to make this plate up. But it seemed like every day there was some little thing that wasn't quite right. And he didn't yell at me or anything like that, but he would point it out. And each day I'd take that into consideration, try to fix it up. And one day I was like a little pride came in, because I remember thinking, I think I have it today. And at the side of the plate, you'd put salt, pepper, slice of lime, and some chopped up ginger. So I'm bringing in the plate, and he goes, "Why so much salt?" It wasn't even in the prep. It was on the side of the plate, right? And at that point, I'm thinking, I just can't do this right. I'm not doing anything right. And I went ahead got through the day, but then I'm thinking, I think I'm going to get another cook. I have to get somebody who can do it better, because I'm not doing it right. So I started to feel some relief that I felt like I had a solution to what I thought was my problem. So the next day, in my mind, I'm going to tell him, well, the next day, his godbrothers were going to come to lunch. It was a sudden thing, and that was a big deal because there had been some what you might call frosty kind of chilly relationship between the godbrothers and Prabhupada and all of us. And one of the criticisms, he had a female cook, which made me feel kind of bad. Not personally, but that I would be used as a criticism against Prabhupada. So I'm thinking, well, I'm definitely not going to be cooking today, because, they're criticizing as a female cook. So I'm thinking, I'll wait till tomorrow. I'll tell them tomorrow that I'm going to get another cook. And suddenly somebody was saying, Prabhupada wants you, Prabhupada wants you. I'd go in, and he just starts telling me what he wants for lunch. So under the circumstances, it didn't seem the right moment to say that I was going to get somebody else. So I went through the whole thing, doing the shopping, coming back, doing the cooking. And somebody else was cooking for the Broad Brothers. That was Anand Maharaj who would do the cooking. But when I got ready to bring the plate in, there was this beautiful curtain that separated this little tiny back room from where Prabhupada was. It was a beautiful used burlap rice bag. That was like the extent of our luxury. And I pulled it aside, and there was a light bulb dangling from the cord. No, nothing fancy, just dangling. And it happened to be on that day. But I was looking, and Prabhupada was like glowing far more than the light bulb. And on each side, he had these godbrothers. I remember 3 of them, but there might have been 4. But I was looking, and I'm seeing Prabhupada looks just like a diamond. He's so glowing. And when a diamond's in a setting, it's even more beautiful. So he looked like a diamond in the setting. The godbrothers were there. It was like a setting. And at the same time, I suddenly saw these venerable Vaishnavas. In our minds, they had been these guys. I mean, we weren't so reverent in our mind. And suddenly I saw them. These are very venerable Vaishnavas. Elderly, like Srila Prabhupada. And I felt a little intimidated. So I took my sari and I pulled it way over my head. Like, you couldn't see anything. And I got on my knees and elbows, and I had my hands holding the plate, so just the plate could be seen. And I crawled in, and I put it down in front of Srila Prabhupada. And he says, so I'm still making obeisances. He goes, yes, she cooks for me. And I criticize her. And the minute he said that, I realized how my consciousness had been in the wrong direction. That was taking as criticism when actually I was asking, in my mind, the meditation, what can I do? How can I make it better? And he was hearing that, and he was giving me the answers in terms of, correction. So that right there was very stunning for me. And then he goes, yes, she cooks for me, and I criticize her. But she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. And so people a lot of times take that as something about me. It was me as an example, but really he was telling all these venerable souls what was his relationship with his disciples, all of us. Because that was the fact. We would do anything for him because he would and did do anything and everything for us.
Amazing. Thank you.
A quick P.S.
Okay, P.S.
The quick P.S. I didn't quit. The next day was such an ecstatic, those fights with everybody, it was total ecstasy because the consciousness had flipped.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
See, isn't that's lovely.
Great realization. It's 4 o'clock right now. We have 30 minutes before the garlanding of Prabhupada, but there are some other Madhujis that have come in to the temple room that I didn't know that would be here. And so maybe if it's okay with y'all, if we, Jai Shri and Kanchambala, let me call one at a time and then you can come up and sit in one of these chairs. Or actually, why don't you all want to relinquish your chairs?
Yes,
For them?
I'd be happy to.
No, let them sit in the chairs. Jai Shri, Kanchambala. So let's start from left to right. Let's, Kanchambala, give the mic to Jai Shri. Just a little introduction. Jai is Jai Shri. Tell us when you were initiated and where?
I met Srila Prabhupada in Hawaii in 1969 and was initiated like a month later by mail.
Okay. And tell us the anecdote that you had with Prabhupada that exemplified his quality of compassion.
All right, well, anyone who's been in ISKCON for a long time knows that on some levels there's difficulty, turmoil, problems. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, was aware of all that. And he, at certain time, he said, I believe he said, ISKCON with all thy faults, I love thee. And he also said that ISKCON was his body. So whenever there's problems, we have to overlook the mundane part of it and the people that are causing problems and understand that they're in the shower getting clean. And Prabhupada's made the house where everyone could live and get clean. So in Hawaii, we had a very unusual circumstance that, as far as I know, had never happened before. Our leader, who was the GBC at the time, sold the temple and left. Took the money, like a whole, like, whoa, who would expect something like that? You know, here we are, we're in Krishna's house, everything's wonderful, Prabhupada is there, and all of a sudden there's no temple, the deities are gone. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is not supposed to happen. But we have to understand it's Kali Yuga, and in the midst of the holy place that Prabhupada has created, there's still Kali Yuga and people with a lot of contamination. But Srila Prabhupada, this person was so dear to Srila Prabhupada that when Prabhupada came over, he came to Hawaii and he actually flew to the other island where this person who had just sold his temple was. And he approached him with great love and compassion and care. What have I done? He basically blamed himself for the situation. And he embraced this person and helped them along in their service. And the girls that he was living with at the time, he took them into India and Prabhupada initiated them. I mean, amazing. He didn't call the police and, call him ill names. I've done all this work and you've done this. Just completely forgiving and just embraced him. And this person had gone on and just passed away recently. And there was another one who was there, and it's not exactly so drastic, but similar. And Prabhupada just embraced that person too and told the devotees not to criticize them. Prabhupada was on a whole different level of understanding and care. This is a compassion of a pure devotee, which we have very far to go to.
Thank you.
Reach.
Wonderful. Haribol. Kanchambala, can you tell us when and where you were initiated?
I got initiated.
Hold it real close to your mouth.
I got initiated in New York in 1967, and Srila Prabhupada was still in India, and then I got initiated actually when he went to San Francisco. I never met Srila Prabhupada, but I was starting to go to the temple. I was underage, and I just really wanted to be initiated, just, falling in love with the temple and chanting. I mean, my first interaction with Srila Prabhupada was hearing his Happening album, the Hare Krishna album, and it was just so beautiful. Anyway, I actually wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada because at that point I was going to the temple for a while, for a few months, before I got, asking for initiation. And when I got initiated, a devotee gave me their Lord Jagannath deities. They were like 14 inches high. And I worshipped Lord Jagannath at home. I set up an altar. And at that time, I didn't know much, and I just, there was no curtain. There was no curtain at the temple either at that time. Everyone ate, slept, dressed in front of Lord Jagannath, prepared boga, But anyway, at home, I set up an altar, and I thought was very beautiful was cattails, moss, bark, anything with nature. And I wrote Srila Prabhupada a 6-page letter. This is just showing his compassion. I was just telling him everything that I was doing. I just wanted to be honest and tell him exactly what was going on. I wasn't allowed to go to the temple because I was underage. It took like 3 subway trains to get to the temple, so it was very hard to get there. But anyway, so I'm writing all this to Srila Prabhupada, and he wrote back such a beautiful, compassionate, kind, encouraging letter to me. He was telling me, everything you are doing at the present moment is approved by me. And I have the letter I wanted to read out loud. He said, "My sincere blessings are for you for your nice prosecution of Krishna consciousness. Whatever you are doing at the present moment is approved by me, and I think on account of you becoming a sincere soul, Krishna is dictating from within, and you are doing things so nicely." And then he was saying, there are 2 gurus, one internal and the other external. The internal guru is Krishna himself seated in everyone's heart, and the external guru is the spiritual master. So a sincere devotee is helped both externally and internally. To the sincere devotee, the internal guru Krishna dictates, but the thing has to be confirmed by the external guru, then it is all right. I am very glad that you don't go out and keep indoors, engaging yourself in Krishna consciousness activities. I was just so ecstatic to get that letter. And at that time, my mother had sent me to a psychiatrist. And I wrote that to Srila Prabhupada also in that letter. And just receiving this letter gave me so much strength, spiritual strength to go on.
Jai. Amazing. Hari Bol.
My name's Havardani, and I was initiated in 1972.
Hold it a little closer to your mouth.
Oh, sorry. I was initiated in 1972 by Srila Prabhupada, and the first time I saw Prabhupada was when I was a hippie. And I don't know how I got to this big auditorium. There were so many people there. I don't know how I even got there or why. And then Prabhupada comes out on the stage. And this one incident affected me so deeply. You know, I wasn't near him. I was kind of on the side in the back. And I looked at him and I thought he was staring at me amidst all these souls. I could feel him just piercing through my heart with so much love. And so you could feel that at a distance. And I really thought he was just staring at me and giving me like Krishna's love through him. And so then I really started to go to the temple, and eventually I joined. And it was okay sleeping down in the basement. I didn't even think about it at the time. I was so happy. I always wanted to be just to love God 24 hours a day for a long time. And finally in the temple, that's what we did. The whole schedule was centered around Krishna. And I was really happy. And all the belongings I had, you know those milk crates, those little milk crates? Everything I had was in a milk crate. So you don't need a lot of material possessions. I was the happiest probably I've ever been with that. I didn't even think about that. I didn't have to worry about clothes or anything. I had maybe 2 saris, and that was it. And so another time, I joined in San Francisco. I don't know if I said that. And then after a few other temples I lived at, I came to Los Angeles. And I remember, this is the second time that I saw him. I was standing on that side of the street, and Prabhupada was coming, and devotees were all lined up. and I wasn't near him, but I could see he just floated. When he didn't walk, I just saw him floating, and he was so effulgent. He was like the sun was coming out of him, you know. And even though I do want to say it would have been wonderful to have had such personal association, but I feel like I did, because I went on Sankirtan and distributed his books for at least 10 years, and that was my big part of my service, and I could feel him. I could feel him there. And he's right there. You know, he's in his books. If you read his books, that's Prabhupada and Krishna. If you chant Hare Krishna, that's Prabhupada giving us Krishna. And I find lately, I'm only thinking about Prabhupada so much. He was a real father. I didn't have a father that was too good, and I was thinking about it. He was my real father, and I want to say this also. I haven't been to the temple in 30 years. I was in the temples for 18 years. And then I lost faith. That's a long story. And I tried to find God, and, you know, I went to this church and that temple, then I became a Buddhist. But it was very dry. I just wasn't satisfied. And I have to tell you, about 6 months ago, I woke up and I just had this amazing feeling of this longing to be in the temple again. I was longing for how my life used to be, you know. And I couldn't stop thinking about Prabhupada and the devotees. And I'm starting to I've read the Bhagavad Gita now, and the first 2 cantos through. So now when I'm reading Prabhupada's books, I didn't really understand it when I was 23 years old. It was just okay. I was in the temple room, and I'm sure I absorbed it, but I didn't really understand that much. Well, now, when I read Prabhupada's books, it's amazing to me. It's on a whole different platform. You know, I'm learning so much, and it's just amazing to me, you know. And I'm so grateful. This is the first time I've been back.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Havardhani Ki Jai. Malati. Hand the mic to David Datiti.
Haribol. So I was here in the early 70s, and we were, the women, we were really close to Prabhupada because we were in there was another temple room. This is the big temple room. We had a smaller temple room. And somehow or other, the women really got close to Prabhupada at that time. So we were right by the door when Prabhupada would come through, and we would be patted first before the men. So I felt like we were being pampered and taken care of and nurtured by Prabhupada personally. So when the temple got too big and we moved into this temple room, which was a whole nother situation, we had kirtan here. And I was feeling really sad because the women got bumped up. We had to be on the balcony, only on the balcony. Only the men were down here. So I thought, oh, we're so far from Prabhupada, you know. And then Prabhupada knew our hearts. So when Prabhupada came into the temple, the first thing he would do is look up at the balcony and smile at us. Because he knew that we were there and we couldn't be with him close, because all the men, I mean, you couldn't even walk in this temple room. It was packed. That's how many devotees were here. So that was a love. Prabhupada was always nourishing us. He was always loving us. And he knew our hearts. And we did have a spot. So usually we were ushered out, and we had a spot in the prasadam room with the kids. We weren't allowed here with the kids. So the kids were amused by puppet shows, And we had a speaker in the prasadam room. But at the end of the lecture, Prabhupada would call all the children and the mothers, and the children got cookies. So we had another spot. And it was wonderful because most of the kids couldn't walk, so we brought the children to Prabhupada. So, and a lot of times they were extra, and all the men were trying to get them, but we got them. So Prabhupada really, he was attentive to us. And then one time in Miami, in Coconut Grove, so Prabhupada came, and there was beautiful banyan trees, and Prabhupada spoke outside. So I thought, oh, Prabhupada's speaking outside. Good, I don't have to leave. So I just sat down, and I didn't move. And I had my child on my lap. I wouldn't move. And then all of a sudden, Tamal Krishna Maharaj comes by and goes, you gotta go, you gotta go. I'm like, no, I'm not going. So Prabhupada knew. And he looked at me, and I said, I'm not going. We're outside. It's okay. Prabhupada said, leave her alone. She will stay. And somehow or other, not a peep from my child, not a peep. And then the next day, Prabhupada awarded me. You know how he awarded me? So everybody was doing the Guru Puja, and they were offering Prabhupada flowers, and I came later, and I was probably the last one. And so Prabhupada had all these flower petals on his lap, and I came with my child, and Prabhupada took all the flower petals from his lap and threw it on my child and on me. And so that's another story, how compassion and love that he gave us. And we could go on and on and on for days, but
let's finish with Alarka. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Alarka, can you tell us, first of all, when and where you were initiated?
In Brooklyn, New York, the first Brooklyn temple.
In
72.
Okay. Tell us about your experience with Prabhupada.
Okay, well, I have a really, I'm going to tell you one story. When we went to India, I went to India twice.
Hold it a little closer to your mouth, please.
I went to India twice, once for the Mayapur festival installation in 75, and once for the installation of Krishna Balaram Mandir in 76. Both times I got really sick. The first time I got really sick, and so, but I wanted to go again because I wanted to have a good memory that I didn't want to have that as my last memory. So when I went the next time, I ended up getting pneumonia. But anyway, but it was the most spiritual experience ever. But anyway, so we went to some place with Prabhupada, and we wandered off, me and a couple girls, and we wandered off and we were spacing out. And when we came back, everybody had left except for Prabhupada and his servants or whatever. And so Prabhupada saw us and he was like, how are the girls going to get back? There was 3 of us or 2. And so they said, oh, that's okay. They could ride on top of this bus with all the pots. And he was like, okay, And then so he says to me, how do you like India? And I was just I was thinking the whole time, I can't wait to go home. And I knew he was just reading my mind, and but he was so sweet, and this is since this is talking about the compassion, I really felt I didn't even know what to say. I was so dumbfounded. And that's pretty much it. Just like on that same trip, I had bought a little mridanga, and we were in the airport with Prabhupada, and we were all sitting around him. And they had a kirtan, because we rode in a plane with Prabhupada going somewhere, in a little plane. And nobody had any instruments except for me. And so they started a kirtan, and so I was playing my little mridanga, and he was like bowing his head, like looking at me. It was so sweet. And then when we were on the plane, he had like a little meal or something, and he said, and he told his servant to go back and give the remnants to the girls. So we got it.
Jai. Haribol. Okay, Nangamandri, did you want to finish with your? You wanted me to remind you about a story.
Oh,
As the crows fly.
okay, yes. There's, how much time do I have? Like 3
We have
minutes?
5
2
minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
First of all, before you start that, let's open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any particular question or comments or questions to any of the Madhujis? Okay, here, use the mic.
One of the devotees mentioned about Prabhupada boiling the milk. Who made that
Kusha.
comment? Kusha? Oh, Kusha. So when you said that Prabhupada wrote many letters, several letters, about boiling the milk, what do you think Prabhupada meant by that?
He wanted to take care of the devotees and train the devotees and enliven the devotees, enthuse them with Krishna consciousness,
Okay, so do you think he was,
concentrate on them and concentrate on giving them everything he knew, all his gifts of Krishna consciousness.
bringing us to a higher level of?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Gentleman here has a question. Tell us your name.
Shesha Gora Haridas. Thank you very much. Wonderful. I was wondering if you see the same mood that you are telling us about Srila Prabhupada also in his commentaries in the books, because it seems sometimes to be like very strict on explaining the philosophy and Shastra and rules. And I sometimes, it is almost like two different people are talking. So I appreciate to know about your comments or realization on that.
That's actually a very common question for people who study theology and religion, that they always say that the teacher or the prophet or the saint is always kind in their interactions with people, but yet when they're preaching the philosophy or certain points, they're very strict. They say that about Muhammad, they say it about Christ, they say it about, Prabhupada. And so it's a common thing. I believe that the thing is that the Shastra and the philosophy holds a very high standard for human beings to follow. And it's a good thing to aspire for the highest understanding. But when what is that highest understanding, and all the rules and regulations that are in all the religions are meant to have compassion and love for God. So these saints all exhibit that compassion and love to everyone in giving that knowledge. So I hope that helps. I think, is that all right?
Okay, we're going to continue. There's going to be a silent RT here, and we're going to continue for 10 more minutes. And then we'll have the garlanding of Srila Prabhupada in 10 minutes. So don't go away.
Hare Krishna, could I address that question?
Yes. Okay, if we can just keep it quiet, keep it down a little bit. We still have some discussion on that last question.
That last question about
Mother Kusha.
Srila Prabhupada on the Vyasasan and writing his books, he preached like a lion. He was the highest standard He taught the highest standard. But when it came time, there's a couple of stories that I have heard from various devotees about Srila Prabhupada allowing things. Like one devotee came and said, Prabhupada, I'm divorcing my wife and remarrying. And later, my husband asked him, he had been massaged during a massage in private at that time, my husband, and said, why did you allow him? And he said, because he would have done it anyway. And if I would have said, don't do it, he would have the additional offense of going against the order of his spiritual master. And on another, so he said, I would digest that. I would just accept. And he accepted our anarthas, our unwanted things. That was his compassion. He taught us the highest example, but he also accepted us as we were, with warts, flaws, and all. But he accepted us as we are, and he tried to get us to improve ourselves. But if we came in a way and had some problem that we were just stuck on, he would forgive us. Forgive us, for they know not what they do. But he always shared with us the highest standard. And he would say over and over again, he said it to me in a letter, I have given all my disciples instructions on how to advance spiritually, but if they cannot follow, what can I do? So Prabhupada didn't want to make our life harder. He wanted to make our life easier. He was compassionate.
Oh, I have another story. So, there was a period of time in my life that I was having a hard time, and I don't want to even mention it, but Prabhupada knew that I was having a hard time. And one time he came up to, he didn't say, but he said like this, like, it'll go away, it's all temporary. So just that motion, maybe at the time I couldn't comprehend it, but later on I understood that Prabhupada said, it'll go away, don't worry. But he knew my mind at that time, and he knew what I was thinking, and he was saying, don't worry, it'll go away.
All right, question?
Well, thank you all for your sharing. One question that I have often is that while those of us who didn't have the experience of Prabhupada personally, we get to relish the stories that you guys share with us. At the same time, it seems a little nostalgic, and I wonder, what do these experiences mean to you today? And how have they formed your spiritual life, or you as individuals, current day? And what do they keep bringing to you? And how can we learn from that experience, those experiences that continue to give?
I had one story I really wanted to tell, and it happened just last year, April Fool's Day. And it was when I came to the movement, I had a childhood sweetheart. And I wanted desperately to give him Krishna consciousness, very much so, in my heart of hearts, soul of souls. But when I met him years later, my sister was married to his cousin and best friend, and saw him in the degraded condition that he was in, I never thought of him again. Last year, 2 months before April 1st, he had written a letter to God in red ink, asking for his soulmate. And his daughter called me and asked me to please help him. And she said he won't go to the hospital, he won't go to the doctor, I think he's dying. And so I called a girlfriend from the neighborhood to go, he's in a different place than I was, to go and see what was happening with him, and she got him admitted to the hospital. But it was no easy task. So they did all the tests, and they said he's not going to survive. And they let him go from the hospital. And his daughter called me and said, He has about 4 hours to live. First, I was on the East Coast and he was on Maui, and I said, I'll come immediately, because I knew I would just chant to him. And she said he'll be dead in 4 hours. So I gave her Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna mantra, Narayana Kavacha, Vishnu Sahasranam, and he has Hawaiian royalty blood, and so I gave him 5th canto, Prahlad Maharaj's Prayer for Peace, 5:18:9, in Hawaiian. I had it translated into Hawaiian. She looped those for 4 hours while she played them for 4 hours till he died. How could I have done that? Krishna and Srila Prabhupada knew my desire to share Krishna consciousness with the man who had become a drug addict. So 55 years later, he fulfilled my desire. And he gave him Krishna consciousness when he couldn't mess it up. He was dying. He died. But he died hearing Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna. That happened last year, April 1st, April Fool's Day. That's how this process works. It works right now, right here, every day of our lives. Prabhupada's compassion crosses over the boundaries of time for all eternity and in all directions. Anyone you come in contact that you share Krishna with, Prabhupada will be there to take care of them. Hare Krishna.
Right. Ananga Manjari, very good, thank you, excellent. Ananga Manjari, in that same relationship, that same regard, can you tell us the story that you have heard about Kartikeya's mother?
Oh, yes, okay.
Okay.
That was very nice.
Hold the mic up close. Hold the mic close to your mouth.
It was in Gainesville, Florida, 1971, I believe, or something like that. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana and he started speaking. He was speaking a lot of philosophy and different things. And one thing I remember, I was sitting right at his feet very close, and he was telling the story that he had a disciple named Kartikeya whose mother was on her deathbed and dying. And she challenged her son, saying, "Where is your Krishna? Is he here now?"
She was inimical.
She was a little inimical, so she said it in a challenging way. "Where is your Krishna? Is he here now?" And then Prabhupada said, then she passed away. So because she mentioned the name Krishna and she called out, talking about him, she went back to Godhead, Prabhupada said. And then he looked right at us and he said, and this is stated in Bhagavad Gita. And he looked like that. And it was very surprising, but it was the one thing I remembered out of the whole lecture. And later, many years later, my mom was also, she was inimical because, inimical in the sense that she lost me at the age of, when I was 16, so she kept thinking the K people, the Krishna people, took my daughter away from me, and so it was heart-aching for her. And I believe that Krishna understands those kind of frustrations, those human frustrations that we have sometime, and he forgives them. But so later on in her life, she ended up having to live with us and with me, and she started liking the devotees, and she started coming to the temple. The devotees would all give her food and treat her nicely because she was elderly. And anyway, one of her last days, she looked at me and she said, in almost the same words, she said, "Where is Krishna? Is he going to come and help me?" And she said it pleadingly. And I said, "Oh yes, Krishna's going to come and help." And I was just thinking, wow, Prabhupada, that was like the only thing I remembered in that whole lecture, and now it's happening right here to me with my mother. And so I helped her the last few days. There was the kids would always come over, my kids, they did kirtan 24/7. It's like when kids are young, they pick up their guitars and stuff, and they were picking up all the instruments and chanting all the time in my house. So and my mother was in the other room, in her last days. And I went in and I said, "Oh, the angels are singing for you, Nana." And she was like, oh, okay, and so then I brought them in. I said, come in, because she's saying, she said something like, I forget, but she said something about the devotees nicely. So I told them to all come in, and they all came in around her bed, and they chanted very wonderfully, melodiously. Actually, your brother, Jagannath, he was singing a beautiful kirtan, and I said, listen, the angels are singing for you. And she went, Hari Bol. And then they all went, Hari Bol. And that was her last words. She actually, for 3 days, she did not say another word after that. And I was like, okay, so we did kirtan 24/7 and like that. But this is like Prabhupada's mercy, because when he said to me that, and then she went back to Godhead, that's stated in Bhagavad Gita. So the mercy is flowing for everyone, again, for everyone, as you said, not just for us, Malati, you were saying, it's for everyone. These are life experiences that we all have, and that's why we're all here still, because we had these experiences. Siddhanta, do I have time for that one more?
No,
Or not?
we're going to wrap it up, but thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Fantastic stories. What a way to remember. And the one, in that regard, I'll just wrap it up real quick. In that regard, as far as compassion, Prabhupada was in Mexico City talking about how if you think of Krishna at the time of death, you'll go back to Godhead. They opened it up after his lecture for questions and answers. And a lady in the audience, she came to the temple, quite often, but not an initiated devotee. She raised her hand, and Prabhupada acknowledged her, and she said, well, Prabhupada, you are telling us that if we can remember Krishna at the time of death, as it says in the Gita, that we will come to him. But what if I remember you at the time of death? Will that have the same effect? Prabhupada paused. Just for a second, closed his eyes and said, yes, that will have the same effect. Thank you very much.